using measurements. Okay, and we're going to do the external part of the fist first, and then we're going to work and do stuff from the interior. So when I'm saying that, if I hold up my fist, I'm going to be measuring basically my fist across from the top to the other side using a ruler. So if I do this, it looks like it's 3 3/4 across from the top. Does that make sense? Okay, so that is the width for my fist. I'm going to double check that across my knuckles, and it's really similar there. And even across the top, I can double check it. So I know that my fist is going to be 3 3/4 across the top. So on my paper, I'm going to write that down. So 3 3/4 inches, and then put it on here across the top. Okay. So I can even take my hand and sheet and lay it down on paper and take it and trace to make it so that I can double check that measurement to know that that's what the width of my fist is. So everybody take your fist, lay it down on your paper, mark one side and the other side. Later on, you're going to use that as a measurement. Does that make sense? Lay your fist down on the paper, trace around your fist. Okay? So you can. We are doing a closed fist, and then we're doing another hand where you're going to be holding an object.
I can't get it flat.
Just lay it down on the paper and trace around it. Okay?
And this is why I was never going to join the turkey. It doesn't even look like a fist.
Well, no, it's not supposed to look like a fist right now. Right now, I'm just trying to get it so you understand how wide your fist
And
is.
this is why I was never going to make a turkey.
Okay. Then the other measurement I want to pay attention to is going to be the width of all my fingers when they're bent up like a fist. I'm going to make my fist. I'm going to take this. I'm going to measure across there. And again, that's about 3 1/2. So it's a little skinnier across where my fingers go across. So I'm going to realize that my fingers, when I'm doing this, are going to be inside of the widest point of my hand. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because your fingers are in narrower. Does that make sense? So you're going to need to pay attention to all those type of things when you're actually doing your pre-measuring. So I advise that you measure across the back like we did in drawing on the paper, across the top of your knuckles. So write that down. So it should say across your knuckles. Knuckles. You can just abbreviate it with it. Then you need to pay attention to how deep your fist is from the top to the bottom this way. Does that make sense? So we can get a measurement to right there where my watch goes across. That's about 4 1/4 also. So then from top to bottom my fist, it's 4 1/4. This was 3 1/2 across my fingers. So if you use a ruler, you can pretty much figure out the blocked in shape for all of the parts of your fist. So then I do it this way, I've gone this way. Now the thickness of my fist from the top to bottom, and it is about 2 1/2 to my top knuckle. So it's basically the thickness of my fist. So that was 2 1/2. So you can break all this down into basic math to be able to get all that stuff measured out. Is everybody with me with that? Does that make sense? So we need to do all that pre-measuring to be able to figure out those basic dimensions for creating the block of our fist. So at this point, now I can take a piece of clay. This is a good roughed in size shape for my fist. I know this is a lot bigger than my fist right now. I can actually take a wire tool and go through and double check to make sure that my width is very similar to what my fist is by measuring, or I can take my physical fist and compare it to this. I started this block of clay a little while ago to make sure that I had enough material. See how the width of my fist lines up with that? Okay? Now laying it on the table, I realize now that there's going to be a lot of extra clay here across the top this way. So I'm going to have to take and cut that off. So I'm going to take a wire tool, one of these tools, and I'm going to take this, I'm going to start to cheat, cut this down, to start to rough it in the size of my fist. So I know I can take that much off safely. So now I need to lay my fist by it again. See how that's close to the height of my fist when I lay it next to it? The width is getting close to what it should be this way. I now need to pay attention to, if I lay my fist on here, now we trace it on the paper, I can even kind of cheat and start to sketch this onto the clay a little bit and figure out roughly where I need to start to cut off more clay. Now I can take the wire tool again, go a little bit outside of that line. I gave myself a little bit of extra room and shave that off and shave this off. So I'm going to slowly keep taking a little bit off at a time to start to roughen the shape of that block to be the shape of my fist. Does that make sense? So that we're going to do a subtractive process. Subtractive means we're taking clay away to start to roughen the fist. So over time, I did the same thing with this, and I kept cutting away, cutting away, cutting away. So if I hold this block up next to this, hopefully you can see that this has the same generalized start of the shape that this fist has over time. It gets rounded up and stuff, but that's how I started this to be able to get my shape started. Does that make sense? So you need to pay attention to each spot where you have the thickness of your fist and what stuff then is going to need to be removed. So if I hold my fist up then to it this way by looking at this, I can tell that my palm from over here, if I pay attention to this angle from here where my fingers stop, if I take this pencil, I can use this to kind of cheat and put a line down. I can draw a line at the angle that it looks like it's across the middle of my fist. It's this way. So roughly, my fingers are now for this part is going to be this part through here. So then I know over here I've got extra material I'm going to need to cut away from the fist. When I start getting to the point where it's hard to try to be able to cut it with a wire, I can actually start to use the pencil and stick the tip of the pencil in and use it to shave this off a little bit at a time to start to get back to where I want the clay to be removed. So I can use it that direction. I can cut down from the top and keep trimming down in to start to get that to the layer of what I want it to be for the thickness. Again, I want to keep my hand next to it to make sure I don't cut off too much, but I want to pay attention to how deep the areas need to be. So like if I hold this up, the deepest area is going to be right here in the middle between this finger and this finger down in my palm, so that on here I can also put a dot about where I think that's going to be to know that that's going to be where I need to dig down in further. Does that make sense? So I'm going to have to just take the tip of the pencil in and start to dig down in and start to remove clay this way to start to get that down to where it's going to be into my palm. So if you can start to see this, it's starting to go down in the way that my palm will go down and in for that hole. Okay? So you have to shave a little bit at a time. You're going to do the same thing then with the hand for the top part for up through here. Yes, I cut this off so it was squared off. My fingers are squared off a little bit, but I want to start to round this off. So we're going to do all this by either moving the clay around a little bit or shaving off using the tip of the pencil. So it's going to be very important you bring a regular pencil to do this. Okay? You're going to do that all the way through for all the parts and pieces until you get to your thumb. The thumb is going to be an added piece of clay that you're going to take it, you're going to sculpt it by looking at your thumb. So starting it like this, right now is this bigger than my thumb? Okay, so if it is, then I want to keep squeezing it out a little bit more to make it about the thickness of my thumb. That's getting closer. Yeah. Okay, it's about the length of my thumb right there. So then I'm going to take this and work on rounding this up. And I'm going to start to focus on just the tip part of my thumb here right now to get it to start to look like the end of my thumb. So right there and there, so it's pretty similar to the way my thumb looks. So then I want to pay attention to, if I take my thumb and I bend it down like this on what it looks like, so I want to take this part, try to get it about that same length, and take and work on bending that down. If I bend it down, I can start to get it to look like my thumb. So right now that it's got about the right length, but now I need to work on the shape. Where this dips down and this goes up, I'm going to have to take this and start to press that down and start to get it like the tip of my thumb. By bending that over, it helps to create like a knuckle-like effect, like what the way my knuckle looks where it bends over. Does that make sense? Okay, so then I'll start it from there, and then I'll pay attention to where my thumb bends down here. So if I bend my thumb in, then I end up with this squared part right here. So then I want to pay attention to how far down. So I'm going to make a little line right there on there lightly, and I'm going to take that and I want to be able to bend that in to be able to make the other bottom part of my thumb. So then when I look at my thumb versus my clay, that I have about the same thickness for all this to get this roughed in. The bottom part, I'm going to have extra clay down through here. I'm going to end up wanting to get rid of this part down on the other side. This eventually then will get worked and put on here on top of the knuckles after I get this part of the hand more developed, where I've done all the separations between the fingers. So we're going to do this block part, and then eventually then this is going to be put on top to be able to be the thumb on top. Does that make sense? So like when you make an actual fist to your hand, you close your hand and then you put your thumb on top. We're going to do the same type of thing with our sculpture. We're going to do this whole piece, and then we're going to put our thumb on top of that and finish sculpting the thumb after this whole part has been done. Does that make sense? But the clay needs to still be soft enough so we can connect it together when we attach the thumb. So it's a good idea, kind of like to pre-shape the thumb like what I did and have it and keep it in a bag, and be careful I don't squash it. But then I want to go through and work through and get my hand completely the way it should be, with all the angles and parts and pieces for my actual hand before I attach that on. So this is actually going to be easier than doing the one holding the object. This is going to change up a lot, because however your hand is for holding the object is going to affect how your hand is. So it's not going to be all standardized thing where it's going to be as easy for me to say for each step on what to do. With the hand that's open, that's holding something, you're going to have to pay attention to how your fingers extend, on how they actually touch the object, where that they're resting on the object, and the direction and how that they're actually grasping the object. So we're going to do this hand second, and we'll probably have to have a couple of different times of me showing you working on one of these for actually trying to show you how it's going to be a little bit different, and the dynamics are going to be a lot different than just a closed fist. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. You guys feel like I've given you enough information to try to be able to get the fist started?
Yeah.
Okay. I will work on this more. I just was starting to pay attention to how my finger on this side actually comes down. So I have to pay attention to where that line is, and then I have to pay attention to where my line of my fingers go across my palm. And then I need to pay attention right in the middle where the separation occurs for my fingers in the middle, for this line that separates this finger, and then the separation between these two fingers, the actual parts and direction of where all these things go, and the thickness of what the fingers are, so it looks the way it's supposed to. So that's going to end up creating the split for my fingers in between. To be able to carve away at those, the best thing to use is the pencil, and to start to cut at an angle a little bit, and you can start to round the edges, and it'll start to look more like fingers and less like a block of clay. As the clay hardens up, it's going to be easier to start to work on this, to actually get a rounded shape of the fingers, to make the fingers look more like fingers. The skinniest finger, of course, is going to be my pinky finger. So I want to take this tool, the tip of the pencil, and start to work down and in and cutting away at this, so that they're not just blocks. So it's going to take time on going down and in and cutting away enough material to start to make it look like your finger. So this is not going to be a project that you spend 10 minutes on and it's going to be completed. This is going to be a project that's honestly going to take days of cutting away to start to get your fingers to look like fingers. The clay is going to harden up a little bit through the process, and it'll make it a little easier to get better detail. I'm going to pass this around so you guys can look at that one on what I'm wanting you to try to do. The clay, the closer that it gets to the leather hard for being able to get better detail, it'll hold a better actual structure to the clay, so when you touch it, it doesn't just smash. So that the smaller details and stuff you guys want to do as it gets harder, and this one's closer to being leather hard. I still could go back over top of this now and give more details to the knuckles and the fingernails and stuff. It makes it kind of hard if